Hello Lockaholics, this is Subsonic 1050 and I've been on a bit of a picking hiatus here for a while. That's kind of how it goes for me. I get really heavy into it for a few months and then my interests will go elsewhere for a while, and I always come back to it. But I thought I'd do a different kind of video today, completely different, in one of my other areas, one of my other big hobbies, which are knives and firearms. It's pretty much my, actually much bigger into those than I am even into lockpicking. But there's such a plethora of videos on those already that I figured I would, mostly do my videos on picking. But one of the things that I thought I would do is a knife comparison, basically for EDC knives, and kind of go over some sort of the road that I've taken to the types of EDC blades that I carry today, and what some of my favorites are and what the features of those blades are. So I'll kind of start off with, I've been carrying an EDC blade on me for many years. And there has been a progression. I kind of started out carrying some, smaller fullers, which is what I still mostly carry, but different. This is one of my first ones. This is a CRKT Kiss, and obviously a very interesting design. Very lightweight, but certainly has some disadvantages to it. I also carried this CRKT Urban Shark for a while. Not a bad knife. Pretty thick and chunky. Blade steel, not the best. Doesn't sharpen very well. Not a bad design, just in my opinion poorly executed. I also had some very terrible knives like this Gerber here. This is just a horrible knife. You can see the frame lock engagement there, how far over that is. It sticks quite a bit. The blade steel is horrendous. You can't sharpen this to save your life. It just feels terribly made. Similar to this Smith & Wesson Extreme Ops. What a piece of garbage. I actually got this knife with a Smith & Wesson tactical pen. It just came with it. Terrible piece of garbage. I also had some other cheaper knives like this Kershaw. This is a made in China Kershaw with Speed Safe. Excellent deployment. Actually, the steel on this isn't terrible. It really sharpens well, but this is a chunky knife. The edge retention on it isn't great, and you can just feel the quality is not quite up to the standard that I wanted. Which brings us to my current 4 favorite EDC blades. Let me get those in here for you. And for the most part, these are not going to be much of a surprise to people who are big into EDC blades. 2 of these are some of the most prolific EDC blades that there have ever been, and then there's 1 or 2 in here that may or may not be surprises for you. But these are the Spyderco Delica 4, and this is the wave deployable version. The Cold Steel Mini AK-47. The Benchmade Mini Griptilian. And the Zero Tolerance 0566. And I'll kind of go over each one of these individually and kind of tell you what I like and don't like about them. I'll go from right to left here. The Spyderco Delica 4 is highly regarded as one of the best EDC blades of all time. And I bought this knife while I was on a wave deployable kick for a while, and that started with actually this mini AK-47 here. The wave deployment on this knife works fantastic. The blade steel is VG10, which is a pretty good blade steel, and it is a very lightweight and thin profile. This thing really just does disappear in your pocket. The clip on it is excellent. However, this is my least favorite of the four of these knives. For me, the quality for cost is just not there. These FFG scales on here, I don't care for them. I actually had to send one of these back and get a different one because these scales actually can move around on here. I don't know if you can see that. This one does it too, but not as badly as the first one that I got. They move. Not a lot, but enough to bother me, particularly when you're really bearing down on the jimping on the spine of the knife there. Also, the lockup on this is not as tight as I would want it to be. There is some up and down wiggle here, and when I'm sacrificing speed of closing the knife for a lockback design, man, I'd sure like to have that be as wiggle free as possible. You know, if I'm using some kind of other lock that allows me some extra speed, then I might be okay with that, but that wiggle does bother me. Also, I know lots of people are big fans of the VG10 steel. I don't know if it's just this particular one or what, but I have noticed that this knife dulls rather quickly. And it's not difficult to sharpen, but it does dull rather quickly. And I wish that they made this in a full flat grind with the wave deployment. I've only seen it in this sort of saber grind. The deployment on it is okay. You know, it's got the spidey hole like most Spydercos. If you really give it a good solid flick, it will, you know, it will come out, and it's okay. I've tried loosening this up a little bit to improve that, and then you get a lot of side-to-side wiggle, which I already have side-to-side wiggle, even as it is. So, all in all, not a bad knife. I know this is one of many people's absolute favorites, and this for me is, if it was a $45 knife or a $50 knife, you know, I would probably still call it a home run. But for the $70, you know, that you typically have to pay for it, not for me. Next here, we've got the Cold Steel Mini AK-47, and I'll just start off by saying, in my opinion, this is one of the most underrated EDC blades on the market. First of all, the price is considerably less than the other options here. This knife, I bought it for around, I think, $45. I think the actual retail might be slightly higher, maybe somewhere in the $50 range, something like that. But this is an excellent little knife. Comes with G10 handles, something that even the Spyderco didn't have at $70, and it's a super aggressive, excellent G10. The grip on this thing is just phenomenal. It's unbelievable on such a small handle, that the grip that you get on this. Also, triad lock. You know, this thing is unbelievably strong. Absolutely no blade play in any direction. Super strong. I absolutely would trust this knife as, you know, mini tactical folder, mini self-defense blade. I would trust this knife to do a lot of heavy-duty tasks that I would not trust, you know, actually either of these knives to do. This knife also has this sort of thumb plate here, which works for wave deployment. The wave deployment works very well. It doesn't work quite as well as the Spyderco does, but this is a dual featured thumb plate here where you can wave off of that, or you can use it as a thumb stud. I will say that, like many things where you try to accomplish two tasks with one thing, it doesn't excel at either one. In fact, that is one of my biggest gripes about this knife, is the thumb deployment. And you can just see that it's tough to do with the camera in the middle here, but I mean, I can thumb deploy this thing, but you really have to, okay, I had to do it off camera there, because you really have to flick your wrist quite a bit to get that to come out. You can just, you know, slowly deploy it like that, works just fine. The wave deployment actually does work pretty well, especially if you practice a little bit with it. You know, you can get it to deploy 100% of the time. If you practice just a little bit, it's just not quite as good as like the regular Emerson style with this thumb plate here. However, you know, the lockup of this knife, the price of this knife, the fact that you get the wave deployment with it, this aggressive G10, for me, this is a home run knife. The biggest complaint I have about it, though, is not the thumb stud. As I usually wave deploy this knife out of my pocket. I usually don't even use this thumb plate for that purpose. I do wave it out of my pocket. So my biggest complaint is the pocket clip. And this is a, you know, well-known thing with most cold steel knives, is their pocket clips are crap. And this pocket clip comes so tight that it is essentially unusable. So I had to use a flat blade screwdriver here and pry this up. You can see there's a little bit of space in there now, and I need that to be able to get this out. As other people have said, you know, this G10 is very aggressive. It will tear up your pockets, although for me, it's not as bad as some other people have stated. Last little kind of mini complaint about it is this black Teflon finish that they use is not very durable. I've carried this for a few months. The blade still looks pretty decent, but you can see, like on the back of this, the lock bar here, that some of that finish is wearing away. So all in all, though, this is an excellent knife, especially at the $45 or $50 price tag. AUS 8A steel, maybe not the best in the world, but it sharpens very well, and you know, it does the job. So love that knife. Moving on, I'm going to go to the zero tolerance here. This is the zero tolerance 0566. I have the least experience out of these four knives with this one. This is my first ZT. I will say that I do like it, but I don't love it. It is quite a bit heavier than the other knives here. Yeah, I think all these other knives are sub 3 ounces. This is a 5.3 ounce blade, I believe, and it's not that much bigger. Let me bring in the cold steel here for a size comparison. If I can get these, my camera doesn't zoom out super far here, but it's tough to see there. But it's not a absolutely huge knife compared to the other ones for the weight difference. It is, however, you know, a very robust knife, but there is a caveat to that. I did notice one of the other YouTubers, Apostle P, had a video on this knife where he laid out some complaints about it, and one of them was the thread engagement of these screws. So the problem here is that there's a stainless steel frame lock on one side, and then on the other side there's a stainless steel liner sort of frame with a G10 handle scale. And with that G10, this side is thicker than the stainless steel side. And they didn't bother to use different lengths of screws. So this G10 side, these screws have very, very little engagement. And honestly, that makes me feel like this knife is more fragile than it should be. If they just simply had some longer screws here, I would trust this knife a lot more than I do. It should be an extremely hard use blade. Look at the thickness of that stainless steel lock bar there, and perfect engagement. Very, very solid lockup. The ergonomics of this knife are excellent. The jimping on the spine is excellent. Great blade shape. Out of the box, this was an assisted knife, which is probably one of my biggest complaints about it. That's another thing Apostle P mentioned, was that the spring didn't start to engage until about here and stopped assisting the knife around here. And it did work as an assisted knife, but it didn't feel quite right. Even Kershaw's cheap Chinese blades, all you need to do is just barely touch that and it just flies open. And I don't know, for whatever reason, this one was not made that way, and it really detracted from the knife quite a bit. So I de-assisted this one. Now it's just a manual flipper. It does work pretty well in that way, and I do like this knife, but for the $140 price tag, I think it's overly priced, and it's also too heavy for EDC. I would EDC this, but it's not going to be my top choice. In fact, I would take the Mini AK over the ZT, especially when you factor in price. But bringing me to my favorite, which is the excellent Benchmade Mini Griptilian. And this knife, in my opinion, is just about the perfect EDC blade. There's only a few very, very minor things I think that could improve it at all. One would be as if they could make it a little bit thinner. It is a little bit of a thicker knife given how small it is. If it was a little bit thinner, you know, it could help a little bit, but honestly, this thing is so light and so small, it really disappears in your pocket as it is. Also, they could put a wave deployment on here. I know that's you know, an Emerson thing, and I'm sure that there's some patent issues that they would need to get resolved, but I know Emerson has licensed those to other companies. I mean, that is a very, very small. I do love wave deployment, but that is an extremely small caveat for this knife. Other than that, this knife is essentially perfect. It has easily, excluding the wave deployment, it has the best deployment of any knife I've ever seen. This is not a spring assisted blade, but this is just how, this is one of the tremendous things about the Benchmade Access Lock, is these things just fly open. I mean, you barely touch it and it's just, you know, I was trying to show just how little force there, but I mean, it's really almost nothing, and it just absolutely flies open. This knife uses 154 cm steel, which I think is a good steel choice. The grip is pretty good. It could be maybe a little bit more ergonomic, but given how small this knife is, it is pretty good in the hand. This jimping, you know, is a little substandard, but it does provide some traction. But honestly, for the types of tasks that I use this knife for, I don't need to have some kind of, you know, super aggressive jimping on here. I use this for opening packages, you know, cutting rope or cardboard or whatever it is that I need to do here and there. The pocket clip on it is excellent, and you know, one of the things that I think people forget to mention with deployment is the ease to close the knife. You know, this thing flies open. Is it as fast as wave deploying a knife? No. I mean, you have to pull it out of your pocket and then deploy it as two separate actions. It absolutely flies open once you do that, but you can't have a faster deployment than having it be open already when it's out of your pocket. However, you know, let me grab the mini AK here. Say I had waved this and this was out of my pocket, and say I'm holding something in this hand that I was cutting on, and now I need to put this knife away. I have to go through this whole process here to shut this knife one-handed. And you know, you got to depress the lock back kind of scoot it over one-handed. This knife, you know, you pull it out of the pocket, deploy it lightning quick, and then when you want to put it away, you just flip it shut. There's nothing to it. It's such a quick knife to use. Just pull it out of your pocket, zip through whatever you're trying to cut through, quick, you know, flip it closed, and you're on to whatever it was that you were working on. You know, love the Benchmade Mini Griptilian, and it is my favorite EDC blade. I am looking at picking up a Benchmade 940. That's the Osborne design knife. It has sort of that sheep's foot reverse tanto blade to it, and that knife is considerably more expensive. This mini grip can be had for $70, $80, $90, you know, depending on where you buy it. The 940 is in the $140 to $160 range. Has a little bit bigger blade, uses aluminum handle scales, but you know, from what I've heard, it is the perfect EDC. So I'd love to try that. But as of for me right now, this Mini Griptilian is hard to beat. So thanks guys for watching, and hope you have a good one.